Oh, okay, I guess I'll see in a second. Hello, thank you guys for joining us this afternoon on such short notice, but I wanted to be sure and talk with you about the 3-to-1 model because after talking with the federal monitoring team this week, I kind of felt like we needed to talk pretty quickly. What I don't want to have happen is I don't want you to be written up as far as something you need to correct, have a corrective action for when the monitoring team comes to check your county. I also don't want you to have a special education director tell you that you can't use the 3-to-1 model because nobody understands it or you can't depict it efficiently. So that's the reason for having this meeting today. Um, I know that some people may have started using it since we did the session this summer through the virtual sessions that we did. And I just want to make sure that we continue to touch base on this. So Libby, I think we did talk about giving a certificate today. Is that correct?
Yes, and I have a link for a
Okay.
survey at the
Okay.
end of the session, and it
Okay.
has been approved by the licensing board.
Okay. Thank you so much. The reason I asked about that is that way I'll be able to see your the information on the people who attended this session, and so I can make sure that we contact you when we talk about this again. I'd like to set up a Teams group actually, if there's some way to do that, but I know some people couldn't join today, so we'll figure out some way around it. But as you start trying to use the 3-to-1 model, you're going to run into situations and issues that you might have questions about. So that's the reason we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to get the help you need. Um, One of the things I wanted to point out, and we'll go ahead and post this, we can send you a copy of this PowerPoint so we have the whole thing. This is a copy of the PowerPoint for this summer. If you don't get it because you weren't a part of this live session, then it's also on our website with the virtual conference information that happened this summer. Um, One of the things that we've added to the information about trying to prove that consultation and collaboration does make a difference is the fact of the collaboration piece of high leverage practices. This spring, the special education directors are receiving information and weekly training through the month of March on high leverage practices. And the collaboration piece is a really important piece for that. So that's another research based reason to say that the 3-to-1 model is a good model to use. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, I would just maybe direct you back to the overview that we did this summer. And when we send out your certificates, maybe we can post the link to that. I forgot to find that. I apologize. Libby, if you can look for it online while I'm talking, we can maybe post it in the chat for people. And I apologize for asking you to do that at this spur of the moment. If we have
So
time.
the link to high leverage practices?
No, no, no. I'm sorry. To our PowerPoint for the 3-to-1
Okay.
collaboration.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I'll work on that. And
Okay.
what I'm seeing on your PowerPoint is not, I mean, it's high leverage practices. Is that what you want to be
That's what I
showing?
wanted to have.
Okay. All right.
Because what I'm doing is this is a whole over an hour presentation. So I'm just going to go through some of the important slides that I think we need to see. But that's the reason I want that link to the full PowerPoint presentation and the full PowerPoint and the video presentation, the recorded webinar of the whole 3-to-1 model in case you didn't get to see it. So, um, but there are a lot of reasons for doing the 3-to-1 model. And I think now, during the pandemic, it's been a perfect time to have been able to use it. With the 3-to-1 model, you have the collaboration with the classroom teacher. And honestly, it's part of our responsibility as far as IDEA is concerned to collaborate with other professionals for the betterment of the students. So that's one of the reasons that we are doing it too. And the research does not prove that providing 2 30-minute sessions per week makes a difference in the student. But the research does support the fact that collaboration and interprofessional collaboration does make a difference. So that's one of the reasons for doing it. I'm assuming that most of you guys are on here because you've been using the 3-to-1 model. And that's the reason I want to skip ahead here to some of the important information, and then we'll talk about the documentation piece of it as far as your schedule is concerned, because I think that's where the monitors are running into issues. Um, I just wanted to briefly go over some of the indirect activities. And one of the, there you can do makeup therapy during that 4th week. You can do integrated therapy in classes. During that week, you can do the STEPS program. Excuse me, you can do teacher planning, common planning with teachers. And the thing of it is a lot of people have said that they don't really know that they would have like a half an hour of planning a month with teachers. But if you even plan with them, once a month, or you plan with them 10 minutes out of their common planning period, you can discuss a lot of students and what they're doing in the classroom, so you can have that academic piece that we're supposed to be supporting, um, and have that for your indirect week activity to say that you've done the collaboration piece. You could do evaluations, monitoring, progress monitoring, dynamic assessments. All kinds of things can happen during that indirect week. Other things, you could schedule meetings during that week. You could do IEPs, eligibility committee reports, fill out the costs forms and that kind of thing, and then Medicaid paperwork. So there are all kinds of activities you can do during that indirect week. Um, with the interprofessional practice, there are ASHA supports it too, and you hear about IPP a lot if you look at anything related to ASHA. And that's what we need to be doing in the school system as well. It's not just for healthcare facilities, it's for education services too. The reason I don't have this in presentation mode is because I'm skipping around through slides. So I apologize for that. I hope you can see it. And I am back in the office now, so there's going to be background noise, and I apologize for that in advance. Um, the main thing that I want to show you, because I want to leave time for you to be able to talk and ask questions, is things to do and don't. That's one of the things we definitely need to discuss, um, is things to do and things not to do if you're going to be using the model. One of the things to do is make sure you have a written schedule for that indirect week of therapy. Because if a special ed director walks in, if a lead therapist walks in, or more likely your principal walks in and says, "What are you doing on this indirect week?" You want to be able to hand them something and say, "This is my schedule." Now, the schedule that you hand them could be your overall plan that you have for that week. We all know things are going to change. It's just like teachers' lesson plans. When a principal checks teachers' lesson plans, they see what their plan is for the week. Now, when the week actually comes, of course, things might change. Things are going to happen. There are going to be assemblies and other things that happen, or the activity goes longer than they thought. So what you want to be able to hand them is what your plan would be for that week, not necessarily what you're doing for that week. Because you can keep those notes for yourself, but you do want to have a schedule. If they walk in and say, "What are you doing this week?" and you'll say, "Well, I'm doing a bunch of things," that's not going to get you what you need to be able to support that you need this week of collaboration. Um, we want to share that indirect week schedule with other service providers, so they know that when it's a good time to contact you, when you can have meetings, those kinds of things. And you can even post it on your door, because that indirect week probably shouldn't have any names on it unless you're seeing a student for therapy. And if you are, if they're, not all students are going to fall in a 3-to-1 model. And so there'll be some students you'll see that 4th week, but on that indirect week schedule, just put their initials for that time spot. Um, do collaborate to schedule that indirect week at the beginning of the year. Talk to your teachers, and even now that people are coming back into schools, it's a good time to do it. Talk to them. When's a good time for me to meet with you? It doesn't have to be, a whole lot of time that you meet with them, but, have an agenda when you talk to them, and go in and say, this is what I need to know, and don't take up their time or yours by just kind of beating around the bush. Make sure to go ahead and get testing finished that week, and spend time wisely. Um, be visible during that week. If you're not visible, unfortunately, there are some people who, for instance, go out and get their nails done um, on work time. If they have a blank spot in their schedule, and we all know that while we may not do it, it makes us all look bad if that happens. So make sure that you're visible during that week, and you should be. If you're doing evaluations, if you are doing observations in classrooms, if you're doing dynamic assessments, whatever you're doing that week, you should be visible. Even if you're doing your Medicaid paperwork, you're going to be at the copier, perhaps, copying your Medicaid forms. So make sure to be visible and document what you did do during that week to be able to prove how you're using that time. And the documentation doesn't have to be like it is on your IEP documentation. On your weekly schedule for that week, just make little notes in the schedule boxes of what you actually did or who you actually tested, that kind of thing. The things you don't want to do is present this, and you may have already presented it, but like a 3-to-1 model. What you don't want to say is, I see students for three weeks, and 1 week I'm off. That is not what it is, because honestly, everybody says who uses this model that your indirect week is probably your busiest, because you're trying to accomplish so many things during that week. You're having meetings, you're doing evaluations, you're doing paperwork, you're prepping devices, you're doing all kinds of things that are pertinent for those students. So it's not a week off. Leave your indirect week schedule blank. You don't want to do that because, like I said, you want to have some pre-planned activities taking place that you can show someone if they come in and say, let me see your schedule. This is the piece that the monitors are having difficulty with when they're coming to your county and they're asking for your schedule. So I want to make sure that we're very clear, and I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to ask questions as we go through this piece, because um, you know we don't want you to have corrective action for these schedules. You have to use some kind of a key, like a map key almost, a code list, or something that indicates how many times you're seeing each student. And we're going to look at some sample schedules in just a minute. The federal monitors don't care when you're making up therapy and that kind of thing, or when you had somebody who didn't log on, or any of that. They just want exactly what your schedule looks like as you plan it before it's even happened. You know, they just want to see what your plan is, because all they're checking for is to make sure that you have the student scheduled for the correct amount of time according to their IEP. That's it. So make sure that you show them that. If you use a schedule that you've always used and you just say, well, this is my schedule now, even though I'm doing 3-to-1, they can't tell that. They think if they see your schedule and you say, this is my weekly schedule, they are taking for granted that you're seeing every one of those students 4 times a month. I mean, 4 weeks out of the month. If you have a code, you have something down there at the bottom that says, I see these kids 3 times, I mean, for the first 3 weeks, however you want to put it, we'll see it in just a second. Make sure that you indicate that you're only seeing them that amount of time. If you hand them a schedule and just say, here's my schedule, and there's nothing that indicates how many times you're seeing those students, they automatically think you're seeing them 4 weeks out of the month. And when they look at your IEPs and they see that you only have 90 minutes of therapy a month instead of 120, for instance, then they're going to say you've overscheduled that student, and you're violating the IEP by pulling them out of regular ed more than they're supposed to be. So that's where the rub is coming in. They have to be able to look at it. And just remember, they're not SLPs. They don't know what we do. They don't care what we do as far as looking at the schedule. What they do care about is making sure that we're providing what's on that student's IEP. So, like I said, it doesn't matter if you're doing makeup therapy for somebody, they don't need to see that. They don't need to see anything other than what your plan is. Now, whatever happens that week, if they're there monitoring for a whole week, whatever happens that week, it doesn't matter. They just want to make sure that you know how many times you're supposed to see that student and your schedule reflects that. So, for instance, let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. This is a sample schedule that we have available um, to show you possible ways to do your schedule. Because I know everybody likes to do their schedule their own way that makes sense to them. I used to do it too. I get it. But we have to make sure that we show them what's happening during that month. So if you see down here, it says above is a detailed schedule of direct SEE times that occur for the first 3 weeks of the month. If there is an asterisk beside the name, then that indicates direct services are also delivered in the 4th week of the month. So that lets them know these kids up here that I'm seeing, these kids, Jane and Johnny and John D. and Sarah and Holly, all these kids are being seen 3 times a month. I mean, 3 weeks out of the month, except Holly. Holly has an asterisk, so she's being seen the 4th week too. That lets them know what's happening. This is an example of an indirect schedule month. I mean, an indirect schedule that you could use. So, like on the 25th here, it says IEP meetings, collaboration, um, prevention groups, screenings, observations. You can see how they listed what activities are that they plan to do that day, that those days of that week. So this is one example of how you can show them this is what I'm doing my first 3 weeks of the month. And when I'm doing this first 3 weeks of the month of direct speech therapy, here's that schedule. And these are the kids I'm seeing. And I'm seeing them all this many times a week. And that's going to add up. These half-hour sessions are going to add up to the number of times they have on their IEP. This is what I'm doing that 4th indirect week. And you can see there aren't any students' names on this one because down here, this asterisk says I'm seeing this student that 4th week. Now, let's go to the next example. When I said you could use a code of some kind. Um, this is an example of using a code. The numbers beside each student's name indicate the number of sessions they have per month or per week, however it's listed on your IEP. I hope that most people are using times per month, minutes per month instead of minutes per week. Minutes per month are easier to make up. So this indicates that this person is seen 3 times, 3 Mondays out of the month. This person's seen 3 Mondays out of the month. This person's only seen, Jimmy's only seen one Tuesday out of the month. Holly, who has some more significant issues, is seen 12 times. This is just an example. I should have had Holly on over here. But let's say she's seen 4 times, and let's put her here too. And let's put her over here one more because she has some significant issues and we need to see her more times than the other students. So this code lets you know that she's seen 4 Mondays, 4 Wednesdays, and 4 Fridays. And then that amount of time should end up matching what is listed on her IEP for sessions per month. This is another example of an indirect week schedule. So for the indirect week, you could have all these types of things listed. These types of things, it just shows you general time blocks that you're doing these types of things. Now, this is the schedule that you would hand to the to the principal or to the monitoring team if they say, we need to see your schedule for the indirect week. This is what you would hand them. What you're actually going to do during that time, though, is it may be other things. I mean, this is just an example we got some from some other place. Let me show you one that we actually created for a county that we worked with. Let me see. Let me stop sharing and then reshare. Okay, so this is kind of a fancy one that we created for a county that we were doing some pilot things with, trying to teach, trying to train 3 to 1, and it shows that um, you can use these time blocks. This is the schedule that you would hand to that monitor or to your principal to show this is what's happening during this week. And this code tells all the things that can happen during those colored blocks of time. When you're keeping your own notes for yourself, and this is not something the monitors need to see or want to see, then you can just make even just some notes to yourself, like observed, and you wouldn't have to type them in, observed TW for 30 minutes for a vow. You can just keep those kinds of notes on this schedule so you know when you did those things, but you don't have to have anything very elaborate. But the big thing I think that everybody gets confused about is they're thinking that the monitors are checking to make sure that you're meeting the students' IEPs, and they are. But what they're doing is they're checking it let me stop sharing my screen for a second. They're checking it by looking at your proposed schedule of what you plan to do. Um, that's the reason I'm saying don't think that you have to show them your um, your whole schedule and how you're going to make up kids and that kind of thing. If they would need that kind of information, they would request that specific information. All they need from you is your planned schedule for that month. That's it. So I hope that that's made things a little bit more clear for you, but I'm really hoping too that you have some questions that you want to ask, or if the monitoring team has already been to see you, if you can tell us about your experience. And you can just unmute, turn your camera on, and talk with us, or I'm hoping that you'll do that. I mean, I know sometimes it's uncomfortable, but I think instead of trying to write so many things in the chat box, it might be easiest for us just to do that. If you don't feel comfortable, you can go ahead and put your questions in the chat box. We'll be glad to keep track of those. But are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
So when I do my schedules, I do one schedule for each week. So I have a schedule for week 1, a schedule for week 2, a schedule for week 3, and a schedule for week 4.
Okay.
Now, I use the 3-to-1 model for a few of my students that receive 90 minutes a month. So
Yep.
do you think that that would be acceptable as long as it's documented what I'm doing during the times where I'm not seeing those students during the 4th week?
Absolutely. As far as the monitors are concerned, on that 4th week, you just wouldn't have their name in that section, that time slot. I would definitely make sure to hand them all 4 weeks of your schedule.
Right.
And, sometimes people change their schedules change because they plan to to try to do makeup therapy or something during those times. I would just give them what your plan is. This is my schedule as it stands right now. I don't know what is going to happen this month, but this is what my schedule looks like right now. That's what I would hand them. And as far as what you're going to hand a principal, if they would come in and ask you to see your schedule, then yes, I would go ahead and just write in what you're doing. And since you're not seeing that student, what activity are you doing during that time frame? That's absolutely fine, because they can tell that every week, and they can count the number of sessions you have for that student, and that will add up to the amount of time they have in their IEP. So that's absolutely fine.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Hey, Leanne, it's Christy
Hey,
Hannah.
Christy, how are you?
I'm good. So I just have a follow-up question on that.
Perfect.
So, okay, so I did the same thing. I gave, we haven't had our monitors yet, but I did
Okay.
give the 4 weeks of March. So when I was noting that it was the ID time versus direct time or whatever, I don't need to specify what activities I'm doing during that ID time. It just needs to be identified that it's indirect time.
If you can, I'm just saying this for your protection for your principal or your special education director. As far as the monitors are concerned, when they're counting up the number of sessions, what's listed in that indirect time is not important to them unless you have indirect time on that IEP. If you have indirect time on that IEP, which it's recommended that you do that if you're doing the 3-to-1, because you need to show that you're doing that collaboration piece. That's the whole reason for doing this schedule, is to schedule time, to allow time for that collaboration piece. If you're not doing that collaboration piece, then you're not doing what needs to be done to help that student make the progress that they need to make. So I hope, I know at first when people first started trying to use it, they said, I don't want to schedule that I don't want to put that indirect time on the IEP, because then I'll be held responsible for it. Yes, you will, but if you also don't have it listed on your IEP and your principal comes in and says, why do you have this, this week off? And you say, well, I have to do my indirect collaboration with the classroom teachers and everything for all of my students. And they say, okay, show us on the IEP where you have to do that, and that's fine. If you don't have that, you don't have anything to justify that you need to do that piece. That's also important when you're trying to tell the parents, I'm reducing the amount of time that your child's going to get, because the research has shown that this collaboration piece will make the difference as far as, moving their progress forward. Because when you're doing the collaboration, you're talking to the teacher not only about what they're doing academically, so you can help support that, but you're also telling them what you're doing in therapy so they can help reinforce what you're doing in the classroom. So that piece is important, and I think a lot of people misunderstood at first and thought, well, this gives me some time to get caught up on things, and it does. But you also, because you're not going to have to collaborate that entire week, for all of your students, you're not going to need to do that. If you plan wisely and are able to attend, let's say, their group planning meetings or their PLCs or something, where you can talk to all the classroom teachers at one level, on grade level at one time, then you've spent that 15 minutes wisely, and you can count that as indirect time for all of your second grade students, for instance. But if you're just using it as, like, to reschedule therapy, if you go to meetings or to do your IEP reviews or to do your paperwork, then you're not using that time what it's really intended to be used for. And the only thing that I'll say about that is, if you continue to do that, then my fear is that either your principal or your special education director are going to say, you're not using this collaboration time the way you're supposed to be using it, so we don't want you to put that in IEPs anymore. And I think that would be doing the student a disservice as well as you.
Okay.
So
I appreciate all that information. I might not have asked the question correct.
I probably got off on a tangent. Sorry.
Okay. So, like she had said, she gave the 4 weeks, and I did the same
Mhm.
thing. What,
Okay.
what I was wondering is, when it's listed as indirect time on the schedule that I'm giving the monitor,
Yeah.
do I need to specify what my plan is during that indirect time? That's what I wanted to
You
know.
you don't have to specify that. It might be easier for you to, just because that way you have that same schedule to hand to the principals.
Okay.
But you don't have to have that for the monitors. No, you
Okay.
don't.
All right. That was my question. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I just don't
Got
want to give them too much information that they're not asking for. I want
That's
to make sure I
exactly
give them
right.
enough. but not. Okay.
Yeah. And
Thank
so
you.
all that, people are so concerned about documenting, I missed this student at the beginning of the week, at the beginning of the month, so I'm going to see them this week when the monitors are here. The monitors don't need to know that. That is too much information. All they need to see is what your therapy plan is. That's it. So, what other questions do you guys have? Is there anybody who's new to using it who we didn't talk with at first? There at first last year, we had a 3-to-1 team that we were kind of working with, and then we did a pilot in Kanawha County. So we had some Kanawha County therapists who were using it. I've kind of since heard, through the grapevine since then that maybe there was still some misunderstanding there, as far as, not knowing what to do with it. So, we're happy to do any additional training, or if you need training within your county, we'll be happy to help you with that, because I think this system is extremely valuable to you and the student. Instead of being scheduled back to back all day long, and not being able to collaborate with anyone, not being able to have time to do anything except in the evenings or at home, this is beneficial for everybody. So we'll be glad to do anything we can to help support you with it.
I have a question, Leanne.
Okay.
There are many months that we are barely getting our 3 weeks of services in because there's always that something happening that fourth week. I think we only have maybe October and March, since they're the longest months, that we actually get that fourth week in. So if I have indirect and I don't get to do the indirect because I'm still doing all my direct in the IEP, do I violate the IEP by not accomplishing the indirect because I still had to do all my direct first?
There's nothing. The IEP is the IEP.
Right.
And so, your direct is just as important as your indirect on the IEP. And when you have those weeks, when you have like Christmas, when there's a whole week off, just remember that during that month, you don't have to get that whole full month's worth of minutes in, right? So if you have 120 minutes per month, what you have to get in that week, because the students aren't available to you, that week that you're off, what you have to get in that month is 90 minutes. So within that 90 minutes that you have to play with, some weeks I would definitely consider making your indirect week one of those weeks that you're in school, because that week is just as important as your direct session in some cases. So it doesn't always have to be the fourth week. You can schedule it the first week out of the month as your indirect week, and you do therapy, direct therapy the rest of the month. You can schedule that month however you want. There's nothing set in stone that says that you have to do that week, the fourth week. There's also nothing that says that you have to do it all in one week, because I know a lot of people were very concerned about having a week where it looked like they weren't seeing students. So what they will do is maybe see students 4 days out of the week, and then have Fridays to do their indirect. And you can do that and just have, maybe 2 weeks. I mean, have 1 week where you have 2 days that you're doing indirect. So you spread your time out throughout the month. It's very flexible, but it's and the versatility is one of the nice things about it. So, just remember that too. It doesn't always have to be that fourth week. Did that answer your question, Tricia?
For the most part, yes. I just was worried about it. Like if I had to give up minutes somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
just, I don't know. That's why I was hesitant about writing indirect in the actual IEP, because like I said, like it's very rarely that I actually have that fourth week or wherever it falls in the month to actually do those things that I had planned to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Sure. And I'm sure, I've heard that from other people too, and I get it. I do get it. And to us, it seems more important to get those direct minutes in. But like I said, IEP minutes are IEP minutes. So they're both important. So you can have a little flexibility with that too. Because honestly, you do need that indirect time. You know, you need some time so you're not doing your Medicaid on the weekends and in evenings. You need some time so you can get your evaluations done. So you're not having to cancel therapy to get evaluations done. Those kinds of things, and cancel therapy all the time to do IEP meetings that are due. Those things do need to happen. But instead of having to cancel every time to do them, if you have that planned time, you know, you can work around it. And like I said, it doesn't have to be 5 days strung together in a row. It doesn't have to be that indirect week that you do. There's flexibility there. What other questions do we have, or comments, or somebody who's using it effectively? If you want to jump in and help us too. Is there anybody who has already been monitored and been able to pass the monitoring with your schedules?
Leanne, I have a question. This is Sarah Martin.
Hey, Sarah.
I have not been monitored yet. I'm actually
Okay.
getting ready to do that like 2 weeks from now.
Okay.
But we, I think, as Berkeley County, have been hesitant to add that indirect minutes in part because of the same reason. We feel like we don't end up with that time on a regular basis to actually do as much as we would like to. Also, in the past, we have been told that if we add indirect to a student's IEP, it has to be spent on that student. So if you put 10 minutes of indirect, so for example, this year I have 10 students in one teacher's class.
Okay.
And so I would have to meet with that teacher for 100 minutes if I had 10 minutes on each IEP, because each kid gets their own 10 minutes. Is that the case?
If that's what your special education director has instructed you to do, then that would be the case.
Okay.
That's not the guidance we would provide, because if you go to a PLC, a common planning period, for instance, for first grade, and you have 10 students in there, and that classroom teacher can tell you within that 10 minutes, you know, what lesson they're working on, what vocabulary they're working on, all those kinds of things that you can apply to all those different students. You can count that for those students, because you're going to be able to apply that information to all those students. You know, same thing if you're doing device programming or something like that, and you've made one communication notebook for a student, but you can duplicate what you've made for the others. You know, that time can be counted for those students because they're actually using that communication book that you made. So I think rather than getting so bogged down with thinking I've got to get those indirect minutes in, honestly, if you start doing the consultation and collaboration, because you know that's really what this whole model is about, is that piece. If you start doing it and go in with, like I said, with an agenda, and say, you know, can you tell me what you're working on in reading? Can you tell me what they're working on in, you know, math? How can I support you? What vocabulary are you using? Or if you go in with, you know, so they know what to expect that you need, and then you go in and are able to tell them, this student's been able to do, you know, ours at the conversation level. This student needs the directions broken down for them, you know, whatever it is for each student, then they can carry over your information too. That's so much more valuable, whether you get the actual, you know, down to the second 15 minutes or whatever you put on your IEP, to have that impact on the student. And if you're concerned that a half an hour you won't be able to get it in, do 15 minutes. I mean, if you can get 15 minutes worth of conversation for the student in a month, I mean, I don't think that's too bad, you know, especially since you can, you know, try to go to group planning meetings and that kind of thing. And honestly, you know, now that we've all become so familiar with Teams or whatever platform, video conferencing platform you guys are using, you can even join, you know, some of those meetings that way. So, you know, a lot of times people have said the barrier is, well, sometimes when I'm at another school, when the second grade teachers are having their planning at my elementary school. Well, I can definitely see that could happen. But, you know, you could do a video conference with them for 15 minutes and get that time in for that month. Um, you know, it's not just a matter of making the schedule convenient for us. and giving us some wiggle room. It's making sure that we're doing that collaborative piece so that the children are benefiting from it. And a lot of times I don't think that's happening, and because it's like you guys said, if it's not on the IEP, then you give up that collaboration time, to get your direct therapy in. And I get it. But maybe that's one of the things we can kind of do then to help support each other, is try to find some brainstorm, some ways that you can get around that. Because, I just hate for people not to use the service delivery option correctly, and then have it be kind of frowned upon by special ed directors, because I think it can be effective. And as I meet with other state coordinators, there are other states that are using it too, and it is helpful. So, and the research supports it. The special ed directors are being primed now, hearing about, as a matter of fact, this coming Thursday, the webinar is going to be on collaboration for high leverage practices. So they're hearing that now. They're understanding it. They've understood it all along, but they're being reminded of it. And so, having that collaboration piece is very important.
Hey, Leanne, it's Melanie.
Hey, Mel.
I think what we've kind of trained ourselves into is kind of doing like the TCM type, that if you're going to build TCM 5 minutes for collaborating with a teacher, it has to be 5 minutes on that student to be able to build. So I think that's kind of where we're kind of getting like confusion, some
Yeah.
haze about which way to directly go. But your explanation of, if you're talking to a teacher, it's still collaboration about that class and about that student. I think that's helpful, just to kind of separate those two types of things. TCM is different than indirect IEP.
It is.
So
It is. That's great. I'm glad you pointed that out. But if you think about it, like I said, you talk to that teacher for that 15 minutes, but what you heard for that 15 minutes, you're going to apply to all those 10 students. So it's not as if you have to just sit there, for whatever you said, Sarah, an hour or whatever it was, 1,000 minutes, 100 minutes, whatever, to find out about that student.
My other question was, if we are emailing with teachers, they're emailing us their newsletters and we're reviewing newsletters and things like that, can we count that as indirect minutes?
Sure. Indirect means that you're working some way with the student, some way with another adult. You're not, I'm sorry, you're not working with the student directly. You're working on their behalf, essentially. Think about it that way. So indirect activities, when we talked about them before, let me see if I can find it in the PowerPoint. There are all kinds of indirect activities. They don't have to be just conversations that you have with a classroom teacher. So, you're getting input through those emails and you're applying that to what the student's doing. Those are all indirect activities that you can use. So, I think that's appropriate. And if you're providing feedback to the teacher saying, okay, when you're doing this lesson, would you please make sure that Paul does this, this and this. He's probably going to have difficulty with the vocabulary there, those kinds of things. As long as that collaboration is taking place, it doesn't necessarily have to be in person to do it. So indirect just means it's not with the student themselves, it's on their behalf.
And can that be a parent, or does it have to be a teacher? I have been told that parents should be included, not as an indirect, because it's not with the teacher.
Yeah, a lot of times people think that the indirect only is with the teacher. And actually, we were trying to look up some definitions at the office. We were trying to do a training this past summer, and we were trying to look up definitions for direct and indirect, and there really aren't those specifics that we could find. But if what you're talking with the parent about, typically when you think of the collaboration that's discussed through IPP and through high leverage practices, it's with the professionals. It's not particularly the parent, but the parent is absolutely an important part of every child's team. So, if you have to spend some time with the parent to, train them on a device, for instance, or something like that, if that's not a related service that you put on your IEP for training, periodic training for parents on devices, then you could count that time. I don't think anybody's going to come around and really try to check your documentation and, go through it and say, you shouldn't have counted this, you should have counted that. For TCM, they might, but for this, as long as you're doing something on behalf of the student, that's indirect. Does that make sense?
That works for me, especially right now with some of our click kids. I have been doing
Sure.
my direct with the parent as opposed to with the teacher, because the parent is the person who's there with them all day. And I have just been CCing the teacher on the email for like, hey, this is our lesson for this week, so that it involves both of them. But I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, and depending on what's happening with each situation, that absolutely makes sense to me that you would, if you're having conversations back and forth, the parent copy the teacher on it so the teacher's aware of what's going on. So that collaboration is still taking place. And definitely you providing feedback. It's not only us getting information from the teachers. It's, we're collaborating with the teachers. We're finding out what the teachers are working on. It's getting them to help us, help support us with what we're working on with the student too. So, definitely providing that feedback to the teachers about this is where the student's currently working. This is what they're working on. This is what we're targeting, those kinds of things. And this is where they're having trouble. Those kinds of things are important because I don't know about you guys, but when I was scheduled back to back every half hour to, sometimes I did 15-minute sessions if it was preschoolers and they couldn't handle the whole half hour. If I stopped and talked to a teacher every time I was transitioning, you know, I wouldn't have a chance to get all my kids in. So there were, a lot of times I didn't talk to the classroom teacher and I didn't talk to the preschool. A lot of times preschool's a little easier because there's not as much structure going on at different times of the day. So you can talk to the preschool teacher when you take them back. But, I couldn't interrupt classes to go in and talk to the teacher during that. And other than that, I didn't have time. So, um, I think trying to have this time that's scheduled that you both know to expect it. Another don't that I would definitely recommend is to not just drop in on a teacher and say, "Hey, I'm here to talk to you about um, Jackie. How's Jackie doing? What's he doing academically? What are you guys doing in reading and all that?" I would make sure it was a scheduled time that they were expecting me. It was a time that they provided for me, if at all possible. So, it was on their terms and during my availability. I would definitely do that instead of, having the expectation just to be able to drop in when I had a few free minutes. Um, you know, my mom was a teacher, and I can tell you that wouldn't go over very well. What other questions or statements do you guys have?
I have one question.
Sure.
So I know you said that we could put like a key or something like that. I don't really do a 3-to-1 model this year, but I do have
Okay.
some students who might have like 90 minutes a month.
Sure.
And so that doesn't really divide evenly. So often I'll schedule a couple 15-minute sessions a week, but then in parentheses under it on my schedule, I wrote 90 minutes a month. Like, will that be okay? Because I'm getting monitored in a couple weeks too.
That's fine. What they do not want is they don't want just a regular schedule with no annotation whatsoever that lets them know how many times you're seeing that student in that month, because that's all they're looking at. They're looking at that schedule. So that schedule has to reflect everything that you're doing. So if you put 90 minutes per month, that absolutely tells them during this time section, I'm seeing this student 90 minutes a month. If that matches up to the IEP, you're good to go.
Okay.
But if you had that person on the schedule without that annotation, they would just assume that you were seeing them for, 120 minutes or whatever out of the month, because they were on that schedule with no annotation, and that would show that you were over your amount of time.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense to everybody? They
Yeah.
have to be able to look at your schedule and see exactly how much time you're providing that student, how much time you plan to provide to them. And like I said, don't put anything on there about, this is a makeup session for him. This is I had to reschedule this student because of this meeting or whatever. They don't want that. They just want to see what your plan is. Okay. So you're going to be able to hand them schedule, and your schedule changes a lot. It changes more than a lot of teachers, definitely than teachers do. Your schedule can change weekly. Make sure, depending on how many kids you get in, how many new kids are placed, and all that kind of thing. So just make sure your schedule's up to date when they come, and that you're reflecting all the IEPs, because you don't know which IEP they're going to pull, which IEPs they're going to pull and ask for your schedules. So make sure that your schedule is always up to date, your main schedule, your main plan. But anything else that you have, like I used to keep my schedule, I had a copy of my schedule that I had, and I would make notes, absent or whatever, and then I would just automatically, try to find another time that week that I could possibly see that student. I kept all those notes for me. That is not something I would hand to a monitor if they came in and said, let me see your schedule. Okay. They just want to see what your plan is, if everything went beautifully and there weren't any snow days, every student was there on time, and every student was there every day, and everything went perfectly. This is what my schedule would look like. That's what they want to see, with no, notes about anything other than making sure they can tell how many sessions a month they're being seen. If you say this is my schedule and they see a weekly schedule, and there's no annotation, they're going to assume that student's being seen 4 weeks out of the month, the same time. Okay?
So Leanne,
Yeah.
so like say it gets to your fourth week and like Laura said, you have a kid that is 80 minutes or 90 minutes and you do the 3. Is it okay then on that fourth week to say if minutes are not met or put up to 90 minutes a month?
I would put up to 90. I would just put, trying to think.
Because I do 5-minute therapy and I have kids that they're 45 minutes a month. And then I see them, sometimes I
Gotcha.
see them 5 minutes, sometimes I see them 10 minutes, but I always come up to their 45.
Okay, yeah, I would make a note. I haven't told them about 5-minute kids, but I will. And make sure that you put that on there. I would make a little note even at the bottom, like I had the notes on the schedules that I showed you. Just a note at the bottom that you're doing 5 minutes kids, and you'll see them during that time up to 45 minutes a month.
Great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Thank you. You guys are all asking great questions. And the thing of it is too, is just remember that when we try to train you guys on new things like this, we don't always know what you don't understand and what you're having issues with. So please tell us. That's why we're here, to try to support you. Um, in the chat box, let me ask you this. Would it be helpful if we either tried to set up a Teams group or had some way to support you guys more periodically than we've done? Would that be of help to you? If you want us to do a Teams group, just put that, or just put meeting, and that'll let us know that we can schedule a meeting like this, like maybe every other month or something, to have people be able to join if they have questions and that kind of thing. So if you could put that in the chat box for us real quickly, we'd appreciate that. And then Libby, so either put Teams or meeting, and then after you guys get finished doing that, we'll have Libby post the link to get your certificate for today.
And Leanne, also on the survey, there's a place for other suggestions.
Okay,
So
great.
and other questions that they might have. So they
Okay.
can also put that in the survey. In fact, that would be a good way to have good information as to whether they would want teams, so they could put that in the survey,
Okay.
or if they would, the kind of supports they need.
Okay. That sounds good, because that is our goal, to support you guys. And there are some people who have been doing 3-to-1 for a while, and I'm going to go ahead and show that information very quickly. thank you guys for putting those comments in there. Let me see. Let me find the PowerPoint. Got too many PowerPoints up here today. Okay, here's green. Okay, so there are some people who are currently doing 3-to-1, who have been doing it for a while. And this is their names. I haven't updated this slide, so just know that Jefferson County therapists are Renee Rourke and Holly Cochran in Raleigh County, Ashley Carney in Jefferson, Ashley Sudduth at the Schools for the Deaf and the Blind, and Melanie is not the lead anymore. It's Sarah Martin. But maybe we can send you guys this information as well, so you could reach out to some people who've been doing it for a while. And actually, we did that before when we had a meeting, a training on 3-to-1. We had some of them join us live to discuss how they do things. And so maybe we can do that for the next meeting or Teams group, whatever we decide to do. It looks like we're getting a lot of meetings, and that's absolutely great. So we can maybe have some of them on with us next time too, so you can talk to people who are really doing it. Kanawha County, there are therapists who are doing it in Kanawha County as well. So we'll try to get some people on with you so you can hear from live people who are doing it. I always say live, but a lot of times I mean real time, but this time I do mean people who are actually doing it within the state. So anyway, Libby has put on the survey for you, and we'll get your certificates out to you. Just, she has like a deadline for this. Libby, what's the deadline for this?
It's going to be Monday evening, so I won't send
Okay.
out the certificates until Tuesday. And
Okay.
I'll also send out the link for the PowerPoint because I wasn't able to find the recorded one, Leanne. So.
Okay, not a problem. And what we'll do is just go ahead and maybe I'll just do a separate email using your list, Libby, that has like the link to the PowerPoints, the video online, and the contact information from some people who are already using it and that kind of thing. So in case you want to reach out to them, because what Libby does is she automates the certificates, and that would mess her automation up. So we'll send you 2 separate emails, and don't expect those maybe Tuesday, and then we'll move forward with that. If you find out that your county is going to be monitored and you're using 3-to-1, if you want me to check, if you want to send me your schedules and have me check them and give you suggestions, I'll be happy to do that. Whatever we can do to help support you through this, because I really believe in it, in the process, and the delivery model, and think that it will be helpful for you and the kids. So anything we can do to help support you, we'll be happy to do. And if you've already been monitored and have been given a corrective action of some kind, that you have to redo your schedules and depict efficiently, how you're seeing the number of sessions you're seeing them, contact me with that information too, and we'll be glad to help you. Okay. All right. Well, thanks you guys for joining us today. We always try to start and end on time, so we're going to go ahead and let you out